us from. I'm excited to be here with Anne. We're going to be talking about the discomfort that comes from change and how we can embrace it. This is the 49th edition of Solution Illuminators Series podcast, and it's going to be exciting. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. It's so great to be here this morning.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to be talking about your books. A couple of them I have here. Right.
You got them both.
So good. It's about change. Change. We're going to talk about change. In the book, you said it is nice to have a plan that is set in stone, but such plan is not realistic. As we all know, change is part of life, and there's nothing we can do about it. But what even got my attention more is a comment in the book. Someone in a workshop said, "I had rather be sad than surprised." Which is like I've never seen that kind of statement before. I would think that being surprised is, people can take that maybe a little bit easier than being sad. But this person said they would rather be sad than be surprised.
Yeah, and that was specifically in regards to changes happening in an organization, where things were changing and they were told one thing and then something else was sprung on them. And he was like, I would rather have known early that something was going to change than think everything was going along just fine and then have it dropped on us. So, yeah.
I think I get it. So, something that I quickly connected to that was communication, which you stated clearly in the book. You talked about transparency in communication. Not enough information, too late information, or incomplete information. In your own experience, how has communication impacted that kind of scenario that we're talking about?
Yeah, when you're leading through change or you're dealing with change with a lot of people, communication is key. I mean, it's the only way to get through it with trust intact, with your culture still being positive, and with this team still sticking around. The more we can communicate, the more we build trust, and the more people can relax in the chaos of change to be able to just do their jobs without constantly worrying what's happening next.
Wow. Doing their job without wondering what's happening next. Which is part of saying that, well, you may not even know every of the steps all the way, but you just know the next thing to do.
Well, exactly. And so often when things are changing, especially these days where things are changing at light speed, there has to be a certain level of trust in the leadership that they're going to give us the information when they can. Because if I don't believe I'm going to get the information when I can get it, there's so many unknowns flying around that it is really unsettling. And it makes people wonder, it makes them not be able to, again, relax and do their jobs when they're just so worried about what's going to happen next. When I can trust my leader, at least I know they'll give me what they can when they can, and we'll all get through this together.
Wow, that's true. They give the right information that they know, as much as what they know. They might not even know everything. Yeah.
Totally. And that's another thing that's really good to communicate sometimes as a leader. Like, look, y'all, I don't have all the information. I don't know what's going to happen next. Here's what I know, and I'll give you as much information as I can when I can. And that, just communicating that, even when you don't have all the information or the information is constantly changing, can really help your team relax and just say, okay, cool, they're going to take care of me. They're doing the best they can. A lot is shifting right now.
Good. Thank you. So now we can get into the conversation as to the various situations that can happen and the suggestions that you offer in the book. For example, you said, when someone makes a mistake, do not make them stand out in the cold alone, taking the heat for them. Be sure to take responsibility for how you could have helped them to be successful as a leader. And that's a very important point, and I don't think most people want to do that.
Well, Well, exactly. It's a really difficult thing to do. But if we want our teams to take the risk of innovation, to be proactive, all of these things take risk. And I got to know if this doesn't go well, that yes, we're going to have a conversation about it. I'm going to learn what didn't go well, and hopefully I won't do it again. But if I know that I'm going to have backup when I'm trying to do my job and my intentions are good and my logic is good, and and I haven't made this mistake before, I'm going to need that backup from my boss. And if they don't feel like they get that, they're not going to take the risk of being proactive and innovative and communicative with their team.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you for saying that. You just mentioned something when the intentions are good. In your book, there's a part that you mention outcome. Sometimes good intentions and efforts don't necessarily mean excellent results. Sometimes it's just not as good. So that's one of the things that I hope that was before I read that, I was interested in that, letting people know that sometimes you just don't get good results. Right? Maybe some reward should be given for genuine efforts.
Well, and this is something that I say I do a keynote for award ceremonies on the power of celebration. And one of the points that I make, yes, celebrate milestones. Yes, celebrate accomplishments, but also celebrate efforts. Because, when we start a project, we have a certain set of information and a certain set of plans. And as things always do, things change along the way. And in hindsight, we may have a ton more information than we had when we started that would make us say, hey, we would have done something differently. But at the time, we did the best we could with what we had. And so to give your team, that understanding, hey, y'all, it didn't go the way we wanted. Yes, we learned a lot along the way, but thank you for putting your effort in. Thank you for giving it your all, because this didn't go well, not because you didn't do the best that you could.
Wow.
Because nobody feels good when things don't go well, right? So being able to recognize, hey, y'all put it all in there. You put it out there and you tried to make it happen. Thank you for that. Now let's go clean up the pieces.
Right. And that's also connect to one of the things you mentioned in your book, creating an environment for safe failure. Because sometimes people don't even want to try because they think they're going to fail, right?
And they think they're going to not only fail, but they think somebody's going to yell at them, or they're going to lose their job, or, and again, if somebody's making the same mistake over and over, that's a completely different conversation. But so many leaders tell me these days, we need our teams to be proactive. We want our teams to innovate. That's a risk. Every single time we try something new, every time we step out, we're taking the risk that it might not go well. And so creating an environment where, yes, we're going to learn from it. Yes, you're going to have to fix it. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to do this together, creates an environment where people are comfortable taking the risk of innovation and of being proactive. And that's incredibly valuable.
Wow, thank you so much. I quickly have to acknowledge people that are joining us already. If you're here, please put it in the chat where you're joining us from, your name, your city. If you have questions for our guests, also put it in the chat. We're going to be able to get to your question at some point. And thank you for joining us. I can see here on Instagram, we have Tolu, Taiwo, and we have More. It's more. Thank you for joining us there on Instagram. If you're here, please put your name in the chat so we can actually acknowledge you and also highlight your question here during the discussion. This is exciting already. I'm already learning a lot and also making sure that we can discuss the important things. Also in the book, I saw that you said, if your team thinks you are getting all the glory from the IOPS for their effort, trust is going into the trash can. Is it not? It's very tempting to be the leaders and say, well, I did it, and things. It's very not common for someone to say, well, this is the success, but I didn't do it alone. I have people behind me that we actually did it together, and actually mentioning the names of some people that actually did the job. In your experience, is that something that has been easy for leaders to do? And when you do workshops, how do you encourage some leaders to do that?
Yeah. Is it something that I see a lot? I think it all depends on the personality style of the leader, and of the experience and, with building teams. But the number one, I read this stat a few years ago and I need to see an update, but the number one at the time complaint on uh, employee satisfaction surveys, it wasn't that I don't make enough money, it wasn't that I don't have enough benefits. It was they don't appreciate the hard work and value I bring to this organization. And the easiest way to combat that is to make the glory of the team public. Let people know, yes, I worked really hard on this, and so did Tolu, and so did John, and so did Susie. And here's my team, and we all did this together. The beauty of that not only is that they get the recognition, they feel like they're valued, and they're going to commit themselves even harder to the next project. But what this also does is it builds bench strength. A lot of leaders think very much about themselves. They don't think about the entire team and the entire organization. And by building bench strength, which is the strength of the team around us, not only on our team, but in the eyes of the whole organization, when the leaders are ready to give me a promotion, I've got somebody who I've brought up, who I've role modeled to, who I've taught, who I've appreciated and valued to step into my role because they've really been able to be visible by sharing that glory. So allowing people to grow and change within your team will help them to be able to move forward in the company. And it actually makes them more committed to you and your projects in the meantime.
Good, good. Yeah, that's very powerful. Visibility, and it's amazing how people have different opinion about visibility. Visibility is very important, especially for people that are just starting their career, people like us, early career people. That's very important. Even some leaders don't need it because they're already visible, right?
Right.
Another thing is that people actually make money from visibility. Some people, that's their brand. They're visible, and you can get this done. You can influence this. That's all some people do actually for a living. So that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
Another part of the book that I also like is when you said, roll up your sleeves and lead from the front, not the easy chair of management. The question is, I don't even know there's an easy chair of management. And if there's one, where can I get mine?
Yeah, right. Where do I get my chair? It comes with a back massage and they feed you grapes, I hear. I never found one.
I mean, that's a very important thing to mention there, because management, as you know, John Maxwell certified, and you also Maxwell certified. We always try to compare management and leadership and trying to see if there is difference between them. Because I know that, I kind of understand what you were referring to there, the differences between management and leadership. It's not exactly the same thing. But is there anything you want to share around that, and based on your experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is one of those balanced things, right? As in a managerial role, you have to make sure your team's doing their stuff, but you've also got stuff to do on your side too, right? But if your team never sees you because you're so busy doing your stuff, they feel like they're left out on an island. Great example, when I worked for Town Sports International, which is a large gym chain on the northeast of the United States, I had 9 directors who worked for me, and they lived between Boston and Washington, D.C. So they were, all spread out. I didn't see them on the day-to-day, but I always made a point of going to them. And I was in New York City, so it was a up to 2-hour train ride. But I would make a point of going to see them, spending the day with them, seeing where their challenges were. If they were having a significant challenge with a gym manager or something, I would go meet with them. But being with them in the tough stuff made them feel like they weren't out on an island by themselves, which these days with so much virtual workers, it's really easy to do that. And it might not be possible to go, to California and see your team, but by being there with them in the challenges they have, it helps them feel supported and it helps them learn. So that is true leadership. Now, the flip side of that is you also need to balance that with taking the time to do the work you have to do to make sure that both sides of your responsibilities are taken care of. Leadership, or true leadership in a management role, is hard because there's so much to juggle which is why, you know, it takes a lot of development to be good in the role.
Wow. Wow. It takes a lot of development to be good in the role. Development has to do with the brain. And you said something about the brain in the book. You said the brain does not like uncertainty, rushes to certainty and jumps to conclusion too fast. And this is something that we deal with every day, right? You see somebody, you don't take time to fully understand them, to fully assess them. You jump into conclusion based on their appearance or something that they say, and you just say, well, you put them in a box and you keep them in the box. They're going to be there forever, except somebody actually came to rescue them from that box. And sometimes some people don't come at all. They just stay in the box forever, like that. And you mentioned that the only way, you suggested in the book, that one of the ways to get out of that is to intentionally seek out unfamiliar experiences. Is there any unfamiliar experience that you had or somebody had that you like to share on that?
Yeah, you know, I believe in this so strongly. I mean, the reason change is hard is because suddenly I don't know what to expect. Something has changed, and I'm like, oh gosh, you know, I don't know what to do. I don't know if it's going to work. I did my TED talk on this because this is such a big thing. And so seeking out those unfamiliar experiences, like going to networking events with a bunch of people you don't know, going to conferences. Now I'm just talking about in the professional realm, you know, putting yourself on a committee that you haven't been on before, you know, volunteering for a project that maybe has a bunch of people you don't know. All of these opportunities to dance in the discomfort of uncertainty helps you build your own trust in yourself, right? Because when I have to sit down and have a performance evaluation conversation with a team member that isn't performing to the standard that I need them to, that's uncomfortable. That's unfamiliar and uncertain because I don't know what's going to happen. And so the more I can get good at trusting myself in these unfamiliar situations, the better I'm going to do in the ones that are required for my job or that I get dropped into. You know, like say they're like, you know, your position is being eliminated. We're moving you over here to this department. You're like, wait, what? Huh? You know, these things that we can't control. So doing that on a professional side. On the personal side, you know, I do this all the time. I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat, which means I didn't talk for 10 days. And everybody who knows me was like, wait a minute, really? You're not going to talk for 10 days? But it was one of those unfamiliar, uncertain things. I didn't know whether I was going to be successful. I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I leapt in and boy, was I nervous as all get out. And fully knew that within a day or two, I could have been hightailing it out of there because I needed to go talk to somebody. But it's those kinds of things where it's like, and you don't need to do 10-day, you know, but it's those kind of things that build your trust in yourself that no matter what uncertain situation comes, I'll be able to figure it out.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, we can go into it now. I also listened to your TEDx talk, and you mentioned some 5 changes in that talk that they were very personal. A couple of them, when you had to change your job from being a teacher to a trainer, and your mom was like, why do you want to do that? Just like that. So any story you want to share around you changing a career at that point and how you were able to adapt to that change?
Sure. Well, and that particular example, I had studied in college to be a teacher, and I was a special ed teacher. I taught K-4 kids with emotional disabilities and behavioral disorders. The kids were awesome. I had so much fun with that. But then I went to SeaWorld over spring break, and I saw the killer whale show, and I saw the dolphin show, and I saw the sea lion show, and I thought, oh my gosh, all those days when I was little, and I said I wanted to be a veterinarian. I didn't actually want to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be an animal trainer. And so I went back home after that spring break and I started researching, what do I need to be an animal trainer? And so when I decided I might want to make this change, I started taking little steps towards it. I read some books. I made some phone calls. I talked to some people. This was before the internet, so it wasn't like I could go Google it. But this is back in the 1900s, as they say. But I started just taking steps and investigating and trying to figure some things out. Then I started volunteering just 1 day a week at the aquarium. I lived in Boston at the time. So I started volunteering. I was just kind of getting a taste of it and seeing what it was like. I didn't go all in. And this is one of the things that we can do when we want to make a big personal change, is to say, okay, how can I just dip a toe? Dip a toe. I don't need to go all the way in yet. I'm not ready to quit my job and, do this. But how can we start to take little steps to see, A, if this is where we want to go, and B, to start the momentum towards it. And that really helped me. Eventually, after 9 months, I was hired as a trainer because what I needed was this psychology background, which I already had, interestingly. So then I got to train seals and sea lions at the aquarium in Boston.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Another change you mentioned in that TED Talk is moving. You said in that TED Talk you moved 25 times and you had to also move to Saudi Arabia as a kid. How was the experience? How was the change?
It was great. I think my personality is particularly built to deal with change. So I was just kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. So we went and, but it was an American family. I was 8 years old and moving to a Muslim country, which is very different than what I was used to. There were different cultures, different customs that we had to be very, very respectful of. And of course, different food and different, friends. And I went to an international school. So there were kids from all over the world there. And, I think it was, and I keep telling a friend of mine literally just moved to Amsterdam last week. And he's got 2 little kids. And I keep telling him, like, Pat, this is the best thing that ever happened to me when I was a little kid. Our whole family was like, oh my God, you can't uproot the kids. I loved it. It has made me, I think, so much more of a courageous person and so much more of a accepting person of differences. We lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 years. Then we moved to Egypt for a year, lived in Cairo, and then we moved to Athens, Greece. And we lived there for 4 years before I went back to the US for high school, for boarding school. But it was an amazing experience, but tons and tons of change. Change became kind of the norm.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. We still have more change that you experienced that we're going to talk about. Yeah. If you're here, please let us know you're here. Put your name, your comment in the section. If you have questions, please put it so that we can pass your question to our guest today. One of the change you also mentioned is your mom said, honey, if it's treating you that badly, you should definitely get a divorce. What was the experience around that, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, it was an interesting, I was in a relationship and it wasn't physically abusive, but it was emotionally and verbally abusive. Mm-hmm. And as a strong, independent American woman, I feel like I would never be in that type of situation. Like, I'd know it, I'd see it. This is not what this is. Mm-hmm. And then the day I realized, 2 years into the marriage, was the day I realized what was actually happening. And it was and this happens with change a lot, because we have certain beliefs and certain judgments about things, ourselves or others or whatever, where we block the possibility block the reality, where we're not willing to admit that we're financially in trouble, or that we're in an abusive marriage, or that we have a way out from a job that's toxic, right? So it took me a while to realize, this is a really bad situation, because I had empathy, because I had emotional intelligence, because I wanted to be a good wife, and I understood the challenges he had in his life that would lead to him treating me like this sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so and this is in my keynote on change. I talk about problem, plan, punch it, which are in the white book that you have.
Yep.
And in problem, part of punch it, Margaret. That's a good one. Part of the recognition that there is a change, that there's a problem in change, is recognizing your own problem. And for the first 2 years of that marriage, I was recognizing his problems that were leading to my feelings of, being dejected and all of the bad feelings I was having. But I didn't look at myself and say, what's my problem here? And once I recognized, this feels awful, I am exhausted, this feels terrible, I don't feel loved, this is not what a marriage is supposed to be like. once I shifted the spotlight from him and all of his challenges to myself, I was like, oh, wait a sec. This is not an acceptable situation. And, once I recognized that, it was like, okay, cool, something's changing. And the next morning I said to him, like, something's got to change. This is not acceptable. We went to counseling for a little while. We tried to work on it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to work it out. He was not willing to work on his stuff. So I ended up getting out of the marriage. But I would not have realized that something needed to change until I looked at my own feelings and said, this is not okay. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And oftentimes in jobs and when we're on teams, we do this. I want to be a good team member. I want to support the team. I want to support the project. And so we don't recognize this is not an acceptable solution for us and something needs to change. So, that was a big, huge lesson that I got from a pretty tough time in my life.
Wow, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. You mentioned the environment, working, right? Then people might have to get out of the job and they're trying to make a decision as to how or if to do that. Any advice on how to assess that? Because maybe somebody is here, they're actually thinking about that kind of change in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, a friend of mine is actually in that situation right now. He hates his job. It's so frustrating. His boss is frustrating. His coworkers are frustrating him. He doesn't like the tasks. And yet he loves the benefits and he loves how close he is to work and he gets to work 4 days a week and the money's good and blah, blah, blah. So it's really important. I've done this before. I was in a job that I really, really didn't like. And I had to figure out, how do I navigate, because we're adults, right? We've got responsibilities. How do I navigate my responsibilities while still making this situation better? And one of the tips in the Get Over It book that you have, the white one, is to consider the big move, right? Yeah, is to consider the big move. So sit in a dark room or a light room, because you have to write, with a pen, or sometimes I'll even turn on my voice recorder and just talk to the phone. But say, okay, if I leave, what does that look like? What do I need financially? What do I need from it? And then if I don't leave, what does that look like? Right? This is why I say consider the big move and don't take the big move necessarily. Because once we've considered it and we look at both sides of it trying to be very objective, we're able to say, okay, here's this situation. Here's this situation. If I leave, if I don't, right? And we're able to kind of balance them against each other. The other thing to also consider is, could you shift your mindset around where you are now? Because like my friend, maybe you're like, I can't leave this money because I have all these responsibilities before my kids graduate from high school. I really like the benefits. I really like this. So how can I shift my expectations about my current situation? Okay. My boss is a terrible leader. Okay. Instead of expecting him every day to be a better leader, how about I expect what I know he is capable of? And how do I work around that? Right? How do I shift my thinking about the tasks I don't like to say, okay, let me just set a timer for 15 minutes, get this thing done, and move on to something I like. That way, I'm shifting the way I behave in my current situation and the way I think to make where I am work for me. Or, no, this is toxic, this is terrible, I'm out. How do I start my exit strategy?
Wow, the exit strategy. Thank you. Thank you so much. One of the changes that I quickly want to touch on that you mentioned in your book is your mom saying, I've lost the use of my right side. How was that change and how were you able to, because I know somebody is experiencing something like that, and that's not something that is personal to you alone. People experience things like that. So how were you able to adjust to that change?
Well, and it's such an interesting change because it's one of those health things. She had a stroke, right? That morning, she gets in the car, she goes to the grocery store, she brings back the groceries, she's putting them away, and all of a sudden she's starting to slur her speech and her hand doesn't work. And all of a sudden, within an hour period, she's going from totally independent in the grocery store to in the hospital being treated for a stroke. This was in 2021, I think. So she's 4 years out of it, but she's still recovering. Her entire life changed in the blink of an eye. She had no idea, am I going to be able to drive? She's an artist. Am I going to be able to paint anymore? Am I going to be able to talk so people understand me? Can I cut my own food because my right hand doesn't work? You know, all of a sudden, everything was different. And it was such an interesting thing for me to think about in context of change. But this happens all the time. A spouse, leaves us, or somebody in our family dies, or we get an illness that changes everything. And it puts all of this uncertainty on us. The beauty of my mom's situation is I lived in the same town as her at the time. My dad was there to take care of her. My brother's an hour north. They've got an amazing group of friends, and everybody just rallied around and made sure that she had everything she needed to be able to, move forward and get better. She's now independently driving. She's painting. It looks a little different, but she's embraced it, which you see at the end of my TED Talk with that little pencil drawing she did.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that helped was not isolating. In that moment of uncertainty, we all rallied around because we all needed support as much as she did. And we all rallied around each other, and nobody had to go through it alone, which I think is huge.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful, being vulnerable and to share that. And everybody had that kind of story. That's the truth. This is life. It hits you unexpectedly, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
So now the same conversation, support system, not isolating, but now in the context of the work environment. In the book, you said, give them an appropriate forum to talk about their discomfort and bond over it, and you will have a more positive and supportive culture throughout the team. I think communication, people don't take communication really seriously, but then we know that everything is all around good communication. Somebody's saying something, they didn't communicate it very well. The other person is saying, wow, this is what I think you said, and I'm not going to confirm whether that's it. I'm just going to be mad about it.
Yep.
And you know what happened? It becomes a problem. The work environment is not friendly anymore. Nobody can get their work done very well. You see the person, you become frightened, and you can't concentrate on what you're doing because of lack of good communication. When you do training around this, are people usually open to do this? And is there any testimonial from making people to talk together, bond together, and things like that?
This is something that everybody wants to do it. Yeah. They're just not prepared for the discomfort that comes with it. And we're never taught how to communicate well, how to say, hey, you just said something that sounded really offensive. It kind of hurt my feelings. I don't know if you meant it. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to clarify what you meant so I can understand what's going on. Like, we don't learn to do that. We don't learn to have conflict. Hey, I'm angry with you and I'd like to try to work this out so we can work together well. If we can have those conversations well, trust can go through the roof and collaboration can go through the roof. But so rarely do people have the skills or the courage to have those conversations at all, let alone well. And so that resentment builds, and and so one of the things I tell leaders is, train them how. Either bring somebody like me in, or there are amazing books on communication. Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, has phenomenal stuff on collaborative communication. Crucial Conversations, it's an oldie but a goodie, fantastic on having on great conversations and how to do it well. Once we learn how to do it, the courage will come a little bit easier. Still uncomfortable. It's still something we don't want to do. But when we have the skills to be able to do it well, at least know how I'm going to approach this, it gives us a little more courage, and we're more likely to be able to have those conversations well. But what the idea in the book of giving people a safe forum to share all the things, I remember one of the greatest bosses I ever had, Tony Ambrosa. It was at Under Armour. And after a big change was announced one time, he brought our department into a room and he said, okay, everybody, complain. And it was like crickets in there. It was like, are you going to complain? No, I'm not going to complain. No, I'm not going to complain. But what he goes, look, I want to know what your challenges are. What are you worried about? What are you angry about losing? What do you think isn't going to work? Because it may be something that we didn't think about that we need to go back and talk about. It may be something we can mitigate the challenge of, or give you more training, or give you more support. Or it may be something that I can just say, wow, yeah, that sucks. We'll have pizza on Friday. But whatever the case, it opened that line of communication to say, yeah, I'm worried about this. I don't know if this is, because we're going to talk about it anyway, right? Might as well give an appropriate forum for us to talk about what we're worried about, what we're angry about, what we're upset about. Again, admitting those feelings. What's my problem? So now we can look at the reality of the situation and how can I start to move forward into this uncertainty with a level of calm, because I'm not busy trying to smash down the resentment and the challenge and the, it's part of life. And so let's get that out and then start moving. But it requires that culture of open communication in order to be able to do that.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's nice that you had a boss that was able to do that. They probably observed the environment and saw that it's a big problem. And it's also cultural. Originally from Nigeria, people, if somebody have a problem with you, we're very vocal. The energy will change, and what the person is saying to you will change. You're probably going to know right away that this person doesn't like you. But it seems that in the American environment, people can successfully hide it, that you don't know that they don't like you, unless you just walk into something that you said, oh, you just said that about me. Or when they turn their back and they know that you're not there, that's when you know. Besides that, you're probably not going to know.
Right.
And that's why open communication is even more important in that kind of environment and things like that.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
Another thing that I also observed in the book is the Chuck Norris kick board by HR director. That was a game changer. Instead of people looking about how their workers are going to be doing badly, they started looking for the good stuff after they engage in that activity. That was the first time I was seeing that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. It was. Let me give you a little background on this. I was going into an organization. It was a big pharmaceutical company and a medical device manufacturing company. And we're walking back to the training room, and with the lady who'd hired me and everything. And we're walking back, and we come across this giant cork board with all of these pieces of paper on it, and a giant cutout of Chuck Norris doing like a roundhouse kick. And I stopped and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, excuse me, what is this? She goes, oh, that's our Chuck Norris kick butt board. And I was like, okay, what's a Chuck Norris kick butt board? She goes, every time somebody does something nice for somebody else, they just put it up there. Write it on a little piece of paper, put it up there. She said, at first, we had a really negative culture. There was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of, everybody just looking for the negative. And so we decided to do this board. She goes, the first month, it was just us managers putting stuff up. But as people started seeing themselves, oh, thanks for holding the door for me when my hands were full, or thanks for your help in that meeting, or thanks so much for taking over that project. It was a huge help. Little things, big things didn't matter. As soon as they started seeing themselves on the board, they were like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. And they started seeing other people doing things. Oh, I'll write it down. She goes, after the third month, this thing was so packed with papers that it was driving the CEO crazy. Finally, he walks by and he goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every month, we're going to take all of them down and we're going to do a drawing for a few $100 grocery gift cards for whoever gets drawn. And she goes, every month now, this packed. I mean, it was littered with paper. It was a hot mess. It would have driven me nuts too. But she said after the 6 months, the culture started to turn around because people were looking for, oh my gosh, you held the door for me. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you helped me with that project. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for taking that call, whatever it was. It just shifted what people were looking for in the job. And again, that goes back to that mindset shift that I talked about. How can you shift the way you think about your current job so you don't have to blow up your life to make your situation better?
Wow, that's very powerful. I hope you can take notes of that. If you're really cool. Enjoying the session, if you like anything about the session, please let our speaker know today so that can encourage other people and things like that. And if you have questions, please put it in the chat. Still talking about the work environment, I also read this: make a point to periodically seek out those quieter people on the team. And that's suggesting that there are people who probably have ideas and they're probably shy on, they don't think their ideas matter, or maybe in the past, they actually were not acknowledged when they were trying to give a suggestion or something. And so they are probably just hesitating to say something. Any experience around helping people like that?
Yeah, and this is one of the things as I think about facilitating meetings, but definitely on collaboration with teams. You know who they are. The people who are more introverted. They're less likely to just share their ideas. I don't happen to be one of them. Those people who are just going to sit back. They're observing it all. They're thinking about it all. And certain personality styles want to take it all in before they start, giving ideas and things like that. So really thinking as a leader, how do I make sure everybody is truly included when it's appropriate for them to be speaking up? How do we make sure that everybody has a voice? And sometimes in facilitating meetings, what I'll do is, I tell them at the beginning before the meeting, I'll say, hey, come with some ideas about XYZ. When we start the meeting, we're going to go around and I'm going to ask everybody at the table for an idea. By doing this before the meeting, it gives those people who want the time to plan what their idea is going to be. And they know they're going to get called on. So it's not necessarily calling them out in this moment. Or a lot of times, if we're having a meeting and we're ideating and trying to come up with some ideas, maybe if there's 20 people in the room, I'll break them into 5 groups of 4. So those people that may not be as comfortable speaking out in front of the giant room can get their ideas in the group, and then the group gives their ideas. There are different ways you can encourage people without immediately calling them out. Like, what do you have to say? I haven't heard from you in a while. Because the introvert's going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't like this is terrible. But if we can do it in a way that makes them feel like comfortable in sharing the ideas and that their ideas are welcome, hopefully they'll feel comfortable sharing them, and you can get some incredible gems that you wouldn't had if you're just waiting for people to get loud.
Yeah. Wow. That's very powerful. I hope people are taking notes, especially leaders that lead teams. And that's a very powerful thing to do. We also can do other things. In the book, you said, when we can see how we are alike, we are more likely to trust each other and act in a civil manner when stuff hits the fan at work. Because guess what? It's gonna happen. But how will people respond when that happens? So having the opportunity to talk, that's still falling under that, having discussion and things like that. That's very important. Very close to that is when you said crush the cliques. During the transition to a new comfort zone, after a change, there's tendency for people to form cliques, right? People coming together and things. I think that's very important. This happens a lot anywhere in the world. This is not even like, oh, this culture does this. In a big environment, people just tend to move towards somebody that they feel comfortable with. And it's now feels like you have teams that are playing against each other, basically, like a sport whereby they play. And a good leader probably don't want that, because you want people to. So how would you suggest that the leader deal with that?
There's a lot of different ways to do it. And take the example I just gave with breaking a room of 20 into 5 groups of 4. Maybe instead of just saying, go to a group of 4, they're going to go to the ones they're comfortable with, right? Saying, okay, if you have, maybe I do something with the name tags beforehand and I put red on some and blue on some and green on some, yellow on some. You're with the red team, which I've specifically put people who don't necessarily know each other really well together, assigning those groups so that people get to interact with people they don't know, because a lot of times they just haven't had the opportunity to interact with them. So they just don't know how great and how cool and how, alike they are. Nobody likes icebreakers, but they can be really a great way to get people interacting that don't know each other very well, so that they can find some of those similarities. The more, again, like you said, the more we know about each other, the more we realize we're alike, the easier it is to collaborate and trust and communicate and all of that stuff. When, I call it the poodle bond, right? If somebody has a picture on their desk of them with their little tiny poodle, I might say, oh my gosh, I grew up with poodles. Oh, I love poodles. Oh my gosh, it's so great. And then when I'm driving you nuts in a meeting, and you talked earlier about freezing people, right? Putting them in a box.
Yeah.
I remember, yes, you're driving me crazy right now in this meeting, but you like poodles. And so again, we learn these little things that help us not to put somebody stuck in a box. Yes, they drive me nuts here, and they're a cool human that has poodles, or loves
Yeah.
barbecue or whatever, so in however we can get our teams all interacting with each other, the value of collaboration and trust and communication that comes from that is incredible. So the more we can bring our teams together, the better.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. One of the ways to bring people together is food, eating,
Yes.
feeding, right? And you also mentioned that in the book. Food releases the feel-good endorphins in your brain. So if you want to improve the morale during the tough times, feed your team.
Now you can't, that can't be your only strategy, but
Right?
it sure doesn't hurt.
Well, I mean, I say that food is a universal language and something that brings people together in terms of, well, even though you're mad at somebody, you still have to eat to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
So you can't be mad at food. You're gonna put the food in your mind, in your mouth to stay alive. So that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen leaders that actually do this intentionally. And sometimes I don't understand why, but when I read your book, it's reminded me as to why they do that. Just, oh yeah, we have a small meeting, they bring food. Even though you know that people might not eat it, but at least you give them the option to say, well, if you want to be part of this, you can be part of this. And a lot of people, when they eat, they're happy, right? They become chatty. They can understand things because the brain needs glucose, right, to be able to process things very well. So yeah, it's a good strategy. So thank you for the reminder. That's very good.
Yeah, that's always kind of my joke. Oh yeah, no, everything will be hard and we'll have pizza on Friday. I mean, it's not an exclusive strategy, but it really does. It brings people together.
Yeah.
And it can be really fun.
Yeah. So very close to that is also when you said, when you laugh with someone, feel good juices flow around in your brain and you let your guard down to build trust. Because I mean, when you meet somebody for the first time, everybody's like, you're a little bit aloof, like you're thinking, can I trust this person? Is this person someone I can talk to, I can trust? But then when that guard is down a little bit, the other person is also letting their guard down a little bit. You have conversation, you feel you have something connected together, even though you're disagreeing on some work aspects. At least you have some common ground, you have something that connects with them, you can talk about. So that's also a very good strategy. You mentioned that.
Thank you. Yeah, my friend Kimberly Faith is a breathwork specialist. And she said to me one time, she said, Ann, think about it. When you laugh, ha, 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 you're breathing. You're actually, and what do they tell you to do when they tell you to relax? They tell you to breathe. And
Yep.
laughing is kind of forced breathing. So from a purely scientific standpoint, you're getting more oxygen to your brain when
Yep.
you're laughing. But also the muscles that are used when you smile, when you laugh, also release some of those positive endorphins in your brain. It makes you feel good. And so the more we can laugh, especially when things are really, really hard. That's why I was talking to a death doula, a life transition counselor the other day. And she said, when you go to these death cafes where people can speak on death and on the experiences they're having, if they have a terminal illness or one of their parents just died or something like this, is a very heavy topic. She said, you would be amazed at how much laughter there is, because it's that relief of, yes, this is heavy and we're in it together. It comes back to that community piece about my mom when she was having a stroke, about my boss who brought us in to say complain. It's that moment where, okay, we're in this together and we're going to be okay, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I process world. Anyways, when I listen to the news, I typically don't listen to news that is not presented in a funny way. I mean, my take is that the situation is bad already, right? So when I'm receiving information, can I receive it in a light way
Yeah.
that is not increasing the burden to me and things like that? And that's why people talk about dark humor, and some people don't like it, but some people actually get away from that stress through that.
It's therapy for some people. You know, I mean, it's the only way if you're in the middle of a really bad situation, having a minute to just be able to laugh. I mean, I married a firefighter one time
Yeah,
and they had some dark humor.
yeah,
But they're dealing with some serious stuff at a moment's notice. You just never know. So
yeah,
the firehouse was always a very jovial place.
yeah, yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that. So one of the points that I also need to make that you highlighted in your book is the highest level of commitment at work is ownership and empowerment. And I think for me, experiencing different work environments, I think one of the reasons why people stay is either of those two, right? Or even the two. Ownership, we've seen companies that say, well, you are employed here, and in order for you to feel that this is your own company, in quote, they're selling stocks to the person so that when you don't show up to work, you're also losing money.
Yeah, that's literal ownership, but we can get the psychological ownership as well.
Yeah. Then also empowerment, knowing that, well, they're also feeling empowered in case they want to take the next step in their career. They're not going to be stuck at some point. And so any take on that, and how do you see it based on your experience?
Yeah, you know, I mean, work engagement at work is at an all-time low right now. People are disengaged, they are stressed, they're having challenges, they don't feel challenged, they don't feel included, they don't feel like their work matters, they're just a bee. And this is in general, not everywhere, but it's at an all-time high. And that means these people don't have ownership. They don't feel like, and I don't mean literally, though literally is great. Um, they don't believe they have much value in what's going on at the organization. They don't feel like it matters that they show up for work. And so they don't, mentally or literally.
Yeah.
So the more we can include people in decisions, show people what their path for development is, provide that development. You know, I was thinking recently, I did a podcast about exactly what you were talking about putting people in a box and freezing
Yep.
them in that
Yeah.
bad place. I had a boss when I worked for Under Armour who said, "You're not leadership material."
Ah.
And I froze her in that exact moment and never moved her out of that. But she didn't empower me. I thought, did they ever train me? Did they ever give me, you know, skills to be able to become a leader, to be able to develop myself? No. So the more we invest in our teams, the more they're going to invest back in us. The more they are part of creating a better environment, the more they're going to be invested in that environment. And it takes time and it takes it doing it in a strategic way. But when we can do that and people are actually engaged and they feel like what I do here matters and they care that I am here, the work that we can get from people and the goodness that they feel about the work they're doing is incredible.
Wow, wow. It's important that you mentioned that the leader is trying some things to make sure that the employees, they understand the change. But then once in a while, you see people who don't want to understand the change. Still talking about change, there's a quote from the book that I really like. People do not resist change; they resist being changed.
Yes.
What 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 does that mean to you?
When changes dropped on us and forced on us, we didn't want it, we didn't pick it, we didn't plan it, we weren't part of it. It's a lot harder to take. And it's a lot easier to dig our heels in because humans will immediately think about what they're losing.
Yeah.
Right? When they pick a change, they're saying, I'm losing this thing I don't want. I'm moving forward. It's still hard, but we get less resistance. Whereas somebody is like shoves you out of your comfort zone and says,
Yeah.
okay, here's your change. Good luck. You know, I mean, you're like, wait, no. Immediately we think, what did we have? What do we want that we will no longer have? What am I losing? All of that. And so the more we can involve people, and this goes right back to ownership and engagement, the more we can involve people in a change. I worked for a company called Les Mills that's headquartered in New Zealand. We were in Baltimore at the time with the US office. And at one point, we were creating a custom Salesforce customer management system for our company. And what we ended up doing, we went out to San Francisco to meet with Salesforce and to talk to them about what we needed it to do, the back end, the front end, how it needed to function, and all this stuff. We actually brought one person from the front line of every team, of our assessment team, of our instructor team, of our customer, like gym team. We brought a frontline person. So somebody entry level with us, because we knew that they knew how the system needed to function every day, every little challenge, all that stuff. But what we didn't realize was that when they went back from San Francisco after that meeting was done, they started telling all of their team members, oh my gosh, we're going to get this. And we talked about this. And they were so excited about the change that everybody felt represented in that change. It stopped being a change that was happening to you. Here's a new system that we developed for you. And it became, here's a new system we all developed together. Even though the people back in Baltimore weren't in the room in San Francisco, they felt represented by somebody on their team. It was the best decision we ever made to bring them with us. We made a better system. The transition went faster, again, because it didn't feel like a change we were thrusting on them. They were involved in it from the beginning.
Wow. They were involved in from the beginning. One of the strategies you mentioned in the book about change, right? You mentioned that it's possible to pair people up. The resistor and the rock star pair. And you use the analogy for adapter, in which case you have the amount of electronic system, and you can plug it right. You cannot plug it directly to the socket. You have to use an adapter to do that. And that makes a lot of sense. That's a good analogy there. Is this a strategy that you think people really embrace a lot, or is something that is still people are gradually warming up to in terms of, well, this person is really accepting the change already, and this person is trying to like maybe sabotage it, because some people like they don't let you know that they are not accepting the change, but behind you they are talking down about the change. So this peer, is there any testimonial from pairing people up this way that you want to share?
You know, this is a strategy where, you know, if I'm moving through a change and I've got some of the people who are at the forefront of it, they're figured it out. And then there's some people lagging back and either not accepting it or not taking it in as fast from a learning standpoint. This is a strategy that deals a little bit more with skill set than with emotional resistance. But by pairing people up, one of the things we can do is from a leadership perspective, it's a humility play. Just like giving people glory when things go well, giving other people some of the spotlight. I may be telling people and training them how to use the new system or training them the new process, but somebody else on my team who's already making it work may be able to word it in a way that makes more sense for this other person than the way I can say it. So by saying, you know, maybe they have a better way to present this to you than I do, allows the team, again, giving that ownership, giving that empowerment to be able to say, I recognize I may not have all the answers here. Let me let somebody who's already figured it out. Would you mind partnering with John for the day? Because I think he's got a few ways that he's figured it out that I may not be able to explain to you. So it's often not on the passive aggressive resistance side, but more on the skill set side or the adopting of changes from processes to systems and all of that. And it needs to be done well, and it needs to be done with a lot of respect and tact. But I know that people have done it and it works beautifully because the light bulb goes off. You're like, oh, well, if that's what you're saying, that's not such a big deal. And they get it, you know?
Yeah. Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. During the conversation today, you talked about you had a boss that actually called people into the meeting and said, well, what do you want to complain about? This is the time for you to complain.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody done that before.
It was a courageous move.
Yeah, because that can go really bad quickly.
That's true.
But in this book, in your book, right, you mentioned the fact that there could be opportunity for that. And my question is, how do you openly and constructively complain about a change without even losing your job before you finish complaining, right?
Yeah. And in that setting, he had given us the chance. So once
Yeah.
he opened the floodgates, we were like, oh, okay, here we go. And that is a cool thing to do, but you're right. It has to be done well. And he knew that 12 of us on the team had a good rapport already. So it wasn't going to go down. But your question is, how do we change? How do we complain in a respectful way so that we don't lose our jobs? I think the main mindset that you have to shift is, rather than going in with a complaint, go in with a possible solution or two. Think about it in terms of that leader's perspective on that problem. Think about it in terms of the company's goals and how this problem that we're going to complain about is taking away from those company goals. So you're not speaking in terms of, this is really bad for me. You're speaking in terms of, here's why this is a challenge from a company standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, and here are a few ideas I have. Now, you also need to go in with a level of humility that they may not take your suggestions. They may not think it's a great idea. There may be other factors that you don't know about. There may be other ripples that the solution that you are presenting could impact. But I think getting yourself in the right mindset, not of complaining and pointing your finger, but of saying, here's a challenge that I have observed. Here's how I think it's impacting the company. Here's an idea I have. I'd love to talk to you about this some more, but presenting it that way, rather than from a place of attack, is going to get you a lot further. Now, it depends on your leadership. If you know you've got that toxic leader, which they're pretty rare actually, who just can't take any feedback or anything, you may need to think about another way to solve the problem. But and again, Crucial Conversations, that book is phenomenal at helping you learn how to present these things well, so that the rest of the conversation, you're not trying to dig yourself out of a hole you got into by walking in going, I don't like this,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing. I hope our viewers are taking notes. I'm taking notes myself. This question has to do with, after all said and done, you talk about the change, you indicated things that needs to be done about the change, but then people still don't want to get on board on the change. They still don't want to be part of the change. As a leader, question is, how do you give the tough information without appearing it's a threat that you're giving out, or you're trying to blackmail them or something in that nature? How do you present, well, it's okay if you don't want to listen to anything I have to say. It's okay if you don't want to be part of this, but then this is what is going to happen if you decide not to be part of this.
The first step I always say is get curious. Rather than being angry, get curious and say, hey, I'm wondering, I've noticed you've been resisting this change. And you do have to have a tough conversation. And it needs to be one-on-one. And, and you need to think about HR ramifications of one-on-one. You might want a mediator there. And what I like to say is that people are going to make the decision for what they do on their own. I can't make anybody do anything. I can't force anybody to do anything. They're going to make a decision on what they're going to do. And so if you have the person who is just resisting, who won't talk to you about it, who won't get on board, they won't implement the change, they are just totally just cutting you out, putting a wall up, nothing. What I recommend is letting them know, what are the next steps if this doesn't get fixed and I don't start seeing you on board by X day? We're going to have to start performance improvement plan. I don't want to have to do that, but I want you to know that's our next step. By saying that, I usually say this outright, like I want to give you all the information you need to make the best decision for yourself. Here's what's going to happen after if I don't see some engagement in this. And I try to be super clear about what exactly I'm looking for. because I want to set them up for success if they decide, okay, cool, I want to get on board. I need them to know what it is that I mean by getting on board, right? So I try to be as specific and concrete as I can about that, letting them know what's going to happen next if they don't, letting them know what support they have, what resources they have, because oftentimes this is a one-way conversation. They're not giving you anything back. And then saying, the ball is in your court. I'd love to chat again in a week's time or 2 weeks, whatever. And we'll go from there. If you need anything between now and then, let me know. I'm here. And I hope that we can work this out. But by giving them all that information, you're giving with them that what they need to make the decision for themselves. And then if they decide not to, when you do have to go put them on a performance improvement plan or, write them up or whatever it is, you don't have to feel bad that you're springing it on them because you let them know that that was the next step. And they chose that, right? They knew what was going to happen. They chose not to do the thing for whatever reason. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They chose not to. Here we go. We move forward with the plan. If they do change, I make sure I follow up as well to say, ever since our meeting, I've noticed you've totally been on board. You went to the training. You've asked a bunch of questions. I really appreciate it. Quick, done. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So making sure that we follow up no matter what.
Wow, that's very powerful. We're wrapping up. These are your books here, right? From your book, you have this sticker. It seems it's your brand. Punch It, Margaret.
Yes.
What's the story behind this? Coming up with this?
Yeah. So the story behind it is my grandmother, Margaret Bonney, was an English teacher, and she was a very stern woman, and she was also a very cautious driver, and she would drive very slowly. And one summer, my brother was 16, I was 14. I'm sitting in the back seat, he's in the front. We're driving along. She comes to a four-way stop, and of course, she lets everybody go that's their turn. And then she gives everyone else at the intersection the look that she used in her English, like the look. And of course, they're like, okay, we're not moving. When she deems it safe, she eases forward, continuing to snap her head back and forth to make sure nobody's moving and it's super safe, right? I can feel my brother's blood boiling in the front seat. And finally he yells, "Punch it, Margaret!" after one of the commercials in the 80s for a Toyota Corolla or something. She, of course, nails it because she's like, what happened? She gets out of the intersection, pulls over, yells at him. But sometimes when we're needing to step into the uncertainty of a new situation, we need 5 seconds of courage to get us moving. We need that little punch it, Margaret, to get us doing the thing we've overthought. We know we need to go do it. So I give this to my audience, and I've trademarked it, so it's mine now. And my next book is probably going to be all around the power of action.
Yes.
But that using that little stupid saying, "Punch it, Margaret," it's kind of silly, so you laugh a little, and when we laugh, we relax, right? And it gives you that little courage to take the step, do the scary thing, and start the momentum that we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation to start moving through change a little bit more courageously.
Wow, that's very powerful. That's very powerful branding. Branding yourself with a story that connects with you personally. That's a personal story. I mean, it's gonna stick with anybody. That's very powerful. Making such into this little sticker.
Yeah, and it was one of those things, the day that I was sitting at the Minneapolis airport having breakfast before my flight home after a speaking engagement, and all of a sudden I hear from across the airport, "Oh my God, you're the Punch It, Margaret lady!" And I'm like, what's happening right now? But I'm like, after that, I was like, all right, I got to trademark this. I got to get stickers. I gotta make this happen.
That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful story. So you also do the MC, Master of Ceremony.
Yeah.
Any experience you like? What's a good experience and a bad experience that you had from being a Master of Ceremony?
Bad experience. The first one that pops in my head was the time there was a fire drill. So we're in the middle of a conference. There's 500 people in the audience, and I'm emceeing. I'm trying to introduce the president, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. And as the MC, you're the one with the mic. You're the one that's sort of in charge of the room. And I mean, I know where the exits are, and but we're all looking around like, it's like when you're at a hotel in the middle of the night, you kind of poke your head out when an alarm goes off. Like, do I really need to, is my life in danger, or is this just annoying? And we ended up having to take everybody out, bring everybody back in. And it was it was an interesting logistical challenge. Of course, the meeting planner was right there with me, but she wanted me to be able to announce everything and get everybody moving and get, all the things. So that kind of got me out of my flow that day.
Yeah.
But a good time. Oh gosh, emceeing is super fun for me because I love being with the audience in the moment. And a lot of my keynote also has interactive parts where I'm talking to the audience. And oftentimes those are the most fun parts where people are interacting with me, they're interacting with each other. And so as an MC, I get to do that. And I'm trying to think of a specific instance. Gosh, when people have yelled stuff out, it's been pretty funny. When you're just like, oh, you just said that in front of all your coworkers. Yeah, I can't think of anything right now, a specific fun moment, but we have a lot of fun when I MC. It's a good time.
Wow. Let's see if you remember one before we wrap up. One question more that I also want to learn from is that I know you've been in the corporate world for about 20 years thereabout. Working in the corporate world, what is some of those lessons that you've learned that you've taken into your career now? What are some of those lessons from the experiences you had when you were in the corporate world that you're now using in your public speaking and training now?
All of them. As I run my own business, I learned so much by working for other people. And it was such an important part of my development. But I think it would come in the collaboration and communication space. I learned when I ran the trade show program for Under Armour for about 2 or 3 years, and learning how to communicate with people to achieve my objectives in a way that made it easy and accessible for them. I used to do really long emails, and I am confident now that probably about 5 of them got read. Because, so I think learning how to collaborate with people, learning how to make it easy for them, learning how to communicate well, communicate clearly and concisely, in order to achieve the things you needed to achieve, as well as what they needed to achieve. So I've always got whoever I'm working with's goals in mind, as well as my own, and finding that way to take both into account, communicate both, deliver where I can on the stuff that's important to them, and also deliver for myself. I think that was a big collaborative lesson from when I worked in quote unquote real jobs.
Yeah, wow. 9 to 5 real jobs.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, so now looking at both situations now, when you were your real job, 9 to 5 or whatever you want to call it, and now what you're doing now, what are the pros and cons? What are the difference in lifestyle? What do you have to change about how you do things or what you do now?
Yeah, sure. I left my job 10 years ago to start my speaking business. I am a solopreneur. So I've got an accountant, and I've got a VA, and I've got a graphic designer, and I've got all these people that work with me, but I pay them as contractors. So it is hard every single day. I joked when I first started my own business that I vacillate daily between abject terror and complete elation. And it has never stopped. In 10 years, it has not stopped. I continue to be challenged every day. It is hard. It is scary. If I'm not out there working, nobody's going to give me a check. So, it's constant pressure to, am I doing the right things? How do I, stay up with the world and continue to stay relevant? How do I continue to stay in touch with my clients so they want to keep hiring me? It is hard, and it is so much fun. I've been in this job for 10 years. And I feel like I'm just getting started.
Wow.
It is so fun, but it is really hard. And you genuinely are constantly thinking, how do I continue to stay relevant and stay in mind and build my business and keep delivering value? And keep And so it's balancing money. It's figuring out how do because during the holidays right now is not a popular time for speakers. Nobody's having a conference right now. They're not having meetings. So in December it dips. In the summer it dips. So how do I create that flow financially to make sure that I can eat in January as everything ramps back up, you know? So many lessons, so many differences. This is not for everyone, but man, I'm having a great time at it.
Yeah. Wow, that's very important you say that. So now where everything is slowing down, slow activities, summer, January, December, how do you prepare for those times that is going to be very random and very impulsive, and you have to get things quickly? What do you do now?
This is the time of year. So I manage financially so that I have plenty of money at Thanksgiving to take me through January. So just from a cash flow standpoint, knowing, I know the expenses of the business, I know the personal expenses, I know what needs to go where, so I can manage all that. But I also know that I can go hard and do, 2 or 3 keynotes potentially a week in September, October, in August, in February, March, April, May, when business is booming. And then these times I relax. I reset for next year. I'm working on another book right now. These are the times where I'm actually home. I can get to know my plants again, and it's just you learn the ebb and flow of the business. So in the fall, I'm not doing a whole lot of this extra stuff, but I know that I've got December to take that time to slow down, to reset, to write, to strategize, and to relax. So it's just understanding the ebb and flow of the business.
Wow, thank you. That's my last question. Is there anything you want to say to our audience that are listening to us? What do you have coming up? What are you working on, and how can they be part of what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, on January 8th, the Cobalt Women's Leadership Conference is a virtual conference. And the speakers at this thing, if you go to cobaltwomensconference.com is the website, it's just January 8th. And it is going to be a spectacular day. The speakers that Chris, the organizer, has put together are amazing, not just in the content that they have, but the way they deliver and the way they engage people. It's going to be spectacular. cobaltwomensconference.com. If you want to use the promo code podcast, just that word as the promo code, you get $50 off. So if you want to go ahead and do that, that's spectacular. And women and allies, as long as you like women, you can come. And then if you're in the Tampa Bay area, Lifelong Learners is a program. I'm doing a custom talk on letting go and the power of letting go of things in order to be happy and renew. So that's going to be super fun. That's at the Tampa Bay area. The Dance Factory, I think is what it's called. So that's going to be fascinating. That's January 20th. Yourchangespeaker.com is my website. You can get everything else there. Follow me on social media, LinkedIn. I'm most active on LinkedIn, and I'd love to see you there.
Good. Thank you so much, Anne. Really excited to be here. Thank you so much for your time and your experience. I learned a lot today. I really appreciate your time and everything that you put into this. I want to see you doing greater things. All the things that you said you're going to do, we're going to be part of it and support you the way we can. Viewers, thank you for being here. This is the end of Solution Illuminators Series podcast. Please like, comment, share with your friends so that we can reach a wider audience. And bye for now. Bye, Anne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.